And that's what this episode is about. The lover, the fourth of Moore's mature masculine archetypes, and what it means for a man to be fully present in his own life, to the people around him, and what it costs to be really known by them. Last episode, we talked about moderation. And the central claim I made was that the mature man does not suppress his desires, he orders them, he aims them. And he doesn't extinguish his appetites, he subordinates them to what is genuinely worth pursuing. So it begs the question, what's generally worth pursuing? I'm not asking that rhetorically. The tradition has an answer, and it's not a vague one. What's genuinely worth pursuing is, in the end, what is genuinely real. That is to say, what's genuinely good, genuinely beautiful, and genuinely true. And the man who has ordered his desires toward those things is not a man who has gone cold inside. He is the man who is most fully alive. And that's what this episode is about. The lover, the fourth of Moore's mature masculine archetypes, and what it means for a man to be fully present in his own life, to the people around him, and what it costs to be really known by them. Let's begin where we always begin, with what the thing actually is, rather than the typical caricatures. The lover, in Moore's schema, is the archetype of aliveness. That word is precise and intentional. The lover is not the archetype of romance, nor of sexuality, nor of emotional sensitivity in the softened therapeutic sense that the word has acquired in recent decades. Aliveness. The lover is the man whose inner life is awake, the man who is capable of being moved by people and things around him. Moore's own account is worth sitting with. The lover is the archetype that connects a man to the world through passion, through sensory experience, through his capacity for beauty. His domain isn't limited to the bedroom. It's the full range of what it means to be a human being who is actually present to his experience. I'm talking art, music, the suffering of another person, the weight of a piece of work that's been done well, the face of someone you love. The lover is the man who can receive these things without deflecting them on the one hand and without being consumed by them on the other. The lover is, in short, the man who hasn't gone dead inside. Now, I want to be careful here because the word eros is going to come up in this episode, and it has been so narrowed by modern usage that we need to reset it before we can use it. Eros, in the classical and patristic sense, is not primarily sexual desire. It's the soul's movement towards its object, towards what is beautiful, what's real, towards what draws the soul upward and outward. Plato gives us the philosophical account in the Symposium. The Church Fathers baptized it and gave it its proper orientation. Eros, rightly ordered, is the love that moves a man first toward God and then in God toward everything else that genuinely deserves to be loved. The lover is the archetype of that movement. Not galloping appetite, not sentiment, rather the soul moving toward what is real. Now, the misreadings, because there are several, and they do real damage. The first misreading is that the lover is a seducer. The lover as a man who collects conquests, who moves from woman to woman, who treats desire as an end in itself. That man is not the mature lover. He is, as we'll see in a moment, one of the lover's shadow forms, the addicted lover, the man possessed by his own appetites. Moore is explicit that this shadow form is not the archetype. The seducer is a man in the grip of what he should be governing. The second misreading is the opposite, the man who treats the lover as somehow less serious than the warrior or the magician, the man who dismisses this territory as soft, as belonging to a therapy session rather than to a serious account of mature masculinity. That dismissal itself is a symptom of what this episode is diagnosing. A man who can only respect the warrior's discipline or the magician's mastery, but can't account for the lover's aliveness, hasn't arrived at mature masculinity. He's constructed an impressive defense. And the third misreading, and this one matters for the men in this audience, is the confusion of emotional expression with the lover. The lover is not the man who talks about his feelings. He's the man whose feelings are actually present and actually governed. Those are not the same thing. and we'll come back to that distinction. If you listened to the last episode, you already met these two men in Aristotle's vocabulary. On the one hand, the profligate, the prodigal, the man whose desires have eaten him up, who can't say no, who chases appetite because he's got nothing better to pursue. And on the other hand, the insensible man, the man who's gone cold, who has either never developed the capacity for genuine feeling or has systematically dismantled it. Moore names the same pair in archetypal terms, the addicted lover and the impotent lover, and it's worth spending a little time with each of them. So first, the addicted lover. The addicted lover is the man who is possessed by eros. Not governed by it, possessed by it. He can't be present to any one thing because he's always distracted by the next thing, the next experience, the next woman, the next hit of whatever it is that makes him feel alive in the moment. The addicted lover can't sustain any depth of feeling because depth requires staying. And staying means sitting with what's actually here rather than pursuing what might be over there. This man isn't always obvious. He may function well in public. He may, in fact, be charming, creative, or intensely present in short bursts. But he can't hold a sustained commitment to a person, a project, or a vocation without the restlessness driving him somewhere else. He's confused being alive with stimulation. Those are not the same thing. Second, the impotent lover. The impotent lover is the man who has gone dead inside. And this is the shadow form I want to spend a little more time on because he's the one more likely to be listening to this episode without knowing it. The impotent lover is defended. He wears armor around his heart. He has, at some point, sometimes at many points across many years, learned that the interior life is dangerous territory, that being moved means being vulnerable, that caring about something means being exposed to losing it. And so he's built a life that doesn't require him to really be present to any of that. He may be a disciplined man. He might have the warrior structure and the magician's competence. From the outside, he can look like the real deal. But inside, and often he knows this even if he wouldn't say it this way, he's not actually there. He performs adequately. He meets his obligations, doesn't fall apart, but he can't really be touched. The warrior and the magician without the lover produce a man who is impressive, but dead. Sit with that for a moment. Competent, disciplined, effective, but hollow on the inside. That's not mature masculinity. No, it's a very well-maintained facade of it. Here's where the last episode pays off. Moderation, sophrosini, self-control, is not the virtue of a man who wants nothing. It's the virtue of a man whose desires are aimed at what is really worth desiring. The man who has self-control in the full sense doesn't suppress his appetites, he integrates them. His desire is present and it's rightly ordered. The lover is the archetypal embodiment of what happens when that ordering is complete. He's not the man who has killed off his eros. He's the man whose eros is fully functional and fully governed, aimed outward toward what is real, toward what genuinely deserves to be loved. That's what makes him capable of recognizing beauty, capable of genuine connection, and capable of bearing the risk of being known. Aristotle's insensible man, the one who has extinguished his desires, who has no appetite for what's genuinely good, is not a virtuous man. He's deficient. And Moore's impotent lover is the same man in archetypal dress. The virtue and the archetype are talking the same failure from different angles. So, when I say the lover is the embodiment of mature self-control, I'm not saying that the lover is restrained. I'm saying his desire is intact, fully present, and well aimed. That is a very different thing. The virtue aims, and when the virtue aims well, you get the lover. I want to talk about something specific now because I think it's the practical crux of what the lover requires of a man and the place where most of the men I encounter are stuck. Being known requires a risk that most men have learned to avoid with great skill. And there are two ways of avoiding it that look very different from the outside. The first is the defended man. The defended man doesn't share himself. He doesn't disclose anything vulnerable. He doesn't let people get close enough to him to see what's actually there inside of him. He's concluded, often not consciously and usually not without reason, that it isn't safe to share what's inside of him. Maybe he showed it once and it got used against him. That's happened to me more than once. Maybe when he was young, the men around him modeled self-containment as strength and openness as weakness. Maybe his life experience simply taught him that what he felt didn't matter to anyone who mattered to him. Whatever the origin, the defended man has built his life so that no one actually gets inside of it. His armor is mistaken by others and often by himself for strength. He's the cool exterior, the reliable, consistent, contained, and he is, underneath it all, alone. He'll often sit in a room like this one or listen to a podcast like this one and feel the pull of what I'm saying, and something in him knows exactly what it would cost, and still keeps the door closed. The second type is more recent and in some ways more complicated. This is the man who has learned the vocabulary of emotional openness, but is using it as a social strategy rather than as genuine self-disclosure. He is absorbed from the surrounding culture that vulnerability is attractive, that emotional expressiveness signals maturity, that the willingness to talk about his feelings is itself the mark of a developed man, and that women want that in a man, so he performs it. He uses the therapeutic lingo. He attends the retreats. He posts the reflective caption. He can tell you in well-constructed sentences about his wounds and his struggles and the growth of his edges. But if you press him, if you actually get close enough to see what's underneath the right words, you find that the door there is also closed. The performance of openness is itself a defense. He is managing how he is perceived, not risking how he's received. And that's not a trivial problem. The man who performs vulnerability is in some ways harder to reach than the defended man because he's constructed a very convincing impression of being open. The defended man at least knows he's armored up. The performing man has often convinced himself that the performance is the real thing. Both of these men are avoiding the same thing, and the thing they're avoiding is not just vulnerability. Rather, it's the specific risk that another person will actually know who they are and that they might not like what they find. That's the real risk. Not discomfort, not exposure, the risk of being seen and being found wanting. And that risk doesn't go away by managing it more skillfully. It goes away, to the extent that it ever goes away, only by taking the risk. Here's where I want to bring in St. Maximus the Confessor, because what I've just said describes, in psychological and pastoral terms, what Maximus names as the deepest level available to us. Maximus wrote 4 centuries, 4 sets of 100 reflections on love. They're in volume 2 of the Philokalia. And what Maximus is doing there is nothing less than a complete account of what eros is, what it's for, and what it does when it's rightly ordered. For Maximus, love is the fundamental orientation of the soul toward its proper object. When eros is rightly ordered, it moves outward, toward God first, and then in God, toward all things and all persons that genuinely exist. The soul that loves rightly is a soul that is moving toward what is real. He puts it simply and bluntly near the beginning of the 1st century, where he says, "One who loves God loves his neighbor as himself." That's not a sentimental claim, it's a structural one. The movement toward God and the movement towards the neighbor are not 2 different movements. They're the same movement aimed in its proper direction. Now, here's what Maximus gives us that Moore does not. And I say this as someone who thinks Moore's work is genuinely illuminating. Maximus tells us what disordered eros actually is. It is eros aimed inward. The soul that is turned back on itself, that has made itself the object of its own desire, that seeks to be known without risking knowing. The soul has disordered its eros. It is moving in the wrong direction. The defended man and the performing man are both, in Maximus's account, men whose eros has folded inward. The defended man has made his own protection the primary object. The performing man has made his own image the primary object. In both cases, the movement that should be going outward, toward God, toward the neighbor, toward the risk of genuine encounter, has instead been redirected toward the self. The lover, in the mature masculine sense, is the man whose eros has been reoriented outward. That's the orthodox account of what it means to be capable of connection. And this is why I said earlier that the lover requires a virtue, self-control or moderation, that has to do with rightly ordering desire. The lover is not the man who has extinguished his eros. He is the man who's allowed it to move in the direction it was made to move. That's an act of tremendous courage, because it requires releasing the grip on self-protection that most of us have been tightening since we were old enough to be hurt. Let me state plainly what we've been building toward. The warrior without the lover is a weapon without conscience. That's disciplined force with no interior life animating it. The magician without the lover is cold. That is, mastery in the service of nothing that genuinely matters to him. And the king without the lover is a tyrant who doesn't know it yet. He's authority, but without the capacity to care genuinely. The lover isn't the softest of the four archetypes. He's the one that makes the other three worth anything. He's the one that insists on the question, why, what for whom, with what genuine presence. And the man who can answer those questions honestly, not with the performed answer, but with the real one, is the man who's ready for what comes next, which is justice, the subject of the next episode. Because the man who can genuinely be in relationship, who can be moved, who can be present, who has taken the risk of being known, is, for the first time, capable of genuine obligation. He can give what is owed. He can be trusted with what's real. That's what justice requires, and the lover is the man who has prepared himself for it. Before the next episode, the sentence to finish is, the person in my life who actually knows me and whom I have let know me is. The person in my life who actually knows me and whom I have let know me is. If you couldn't finish that sentence with a name, if the honest answer is that there is no one, it's not a small thing. That's the thing, what this episode is about. The lover is not the man who has love figured out. He's the man who has decided that the risk of genuine connection is worth taking, and who keeps deciding it even when it costs him. That's the forging. I'm Father Michael Butler. This is Fire and Iron. I'll see you in the next episode.